If you'd like to open your Bibles to John chapter 21. John chapter 21. So one of the challenges in preaching, I think, is when you get to something like this that's kind of familiar to a lot of us, trying to see something maybe that you've not noticed before, trying to tell the story in a different way, or just to kind of repeat what you've heard and hope it emphasizes something. And I was struggling with this one as to what exactly to see here. And the more I looked at it, the more I felt like this is a story about identity, which is a popular idea in our world nowadays. You hear all kinds of things about identity and who you are and what you represent. And we have a lot of arguments about identity. You hear all kinds of things about gender identity right now and the way the world works. We think in terms of we're Cowboys or Sooners or Crimson Tide, or we're Democrats or we're Republicans, or we're men or women, or here in Oklahoma, the tribe that you're in, all these different things that represent our identity. And I think we find Peter in John 21 is someone who's kind of struggling with this idea of who he is anymore. And I like to think of it in terms of second last names. This is an idea that I stole from my preacher when I was in high school, Dave Meller, and he said that people are often given second last names, which is to say there is something that people connect with you as your identity. We've talked about this concept before, but I feel like it really hits home here in John 21. And so for each of us, there is something that is kind of an identifier about us. We quite a bit actually, will go out to eat with Hendricks and Howards because we like similar foods and like to hang out and talk and all of that. And every time we go to eat with them, because Camille and Darla are teachers, there are former students. And I at some point think to myself, one or both of them has taught every person in Ada at this point, I think. But because we'll sit there and it's like every person that comes by, it may be a kid who was in class last year, or it may be somebody that you start to question how old these people are you're eating with because they were elementary school long, long ago. And they will come up and talk with Camila or Darla, and there's always hugs exchanged and all this kind of stuff. And when they leave, I don't know if I've ever asked the question, but I've thought to myself many times, they couldn't have all been good students. I mean, just statistically, it's not possible. There had to be some of these people that are coming up and having this friendly exchange where everybody is everybody's best friend that were an absolute terror in class at some point, or vice versa are, oh, there's Miss Hendricks, I have to go say hello. I remember what that was like, and going through all that in their minds. And we have this thing. As a youth minister for a lot of years, I had kids and classes and everything else that I would kind of identify in my mind, oh yeah, I remember them. And on the other hand, oh yeah, I remember them just really pleasantly. And then it terrifies me to think there are people having these same thoughts about me. I have thought to myself occasionally, hopefully only occasionally, when I step down from here and go stand in the back, I hope it was no one's first day to visit today, because that sermon was a total dud. And I hope they don't think, I never want to hear that again, I'm never going back. And I have all those, just insecurities that come up. There are times where I will say something to someone, and I will think to myself, I hope there's another opportunity for another conversation at some point where I don't put my foot in my mouth, I don't look ridiculous. Or there are times in life, and I think this is where a lot of us can probably really connect, where you have just absolutely messed up. And there are people in your life that have a hard time letting go of that with you, even if you've tried to move on. And so forever in their mind, you feel like you're that person. I will run into people from time to time that I haven't seen in years and years and years, and I will think to myself, okay, what Brian did they know? What is the thing that connected with them that they see me and they think this thing? And for Peter in John chapter 21, he has to be struggling with some of this because of who he is. So when we think about Peter, I want you to ask yourself the question as we think about Peter, what might Peter's second last name be? Because the Peter we find in the Gospels is very up and down. He has, and I think a lot like us, probably a lot of why some of us really associate with Peter is we get it. We get the idea that there are times where you do the amazing thing, and there are times where you mess up so badly you just want to go somewhere and hide. What might his second last name be? So let's think some about Peter. Peter, back in Matthew chapter 14, sees Jesus walking to him on the water, and Jesus calls out so they won't fear. And Peter in Matthew 14 and verse 28 says, Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. So in this moment, with all these guys in the boat not knowing what to do, Peter's the one who speaks up, and then he gets out of the boat and walks on the water. So in this moment, Peter, he is the water walker. And if this is the only moment you had with Peter, forever, Peter would be, he is that guy who walked on water. Other than Jesus, who clearly could, but Peter is the guy who got out of the boat and walked on the water. But then just moments later, we see that he loses sight of Jesus. And he begins to sink, and then Jesus, it says, immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And within moments, Peter goes from water walker to doubter. We talk about doubting Thomas. Here's doubting Peter in this moment, where he had incredible faith, incredible trust in Jesus, and then sees the wind and the waves and doesn't know what to do, and he's at the other end of the spectrum all of a sudden. We go a little further into the story, and Jesus is transfigured up on the mountain. And all the disciples there are seeing him and Moses and Elijah and are confused about what to do. And it says that Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good that we're here. If you wish, we will make 3 tents here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." So in this moment, we could label him lots of ways, but Peter's kind of this tent builder right now. Okay, here's something really good happening. We got to do something. We've got to get involved. We've got to be a part of it. And so Peter has this idea of, well, let's build a tent here. Or we go further into the story, Matthew chapter 16. And Jesus is asking them this question about, who are people saying that I am? And they say, well, some people think you're a Moses or Elijah or one of the prophets. They don't know what to make of you. And then he says, well, but what about you? Who do you say that I am? And he hasn't really revealed all of that to them yet. He's kind of talked around it. He's hinted towards it. He showed them who he is and what he does. But they haven't really quite grasped it yet, except Peter, whose wheels are obviously turning. It says that Simon Peter replied, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." So Peter's the one who gets it. Peter here, he is the confessor. He's the one who sees who Jesus is, and he's not holding back with it. He's not thinking it, but not willing to say it. He speaks up and says the thing that Jesus wants to hear. He is the Son of God. He is the Christ. And then further into the story, Jesus is going around there at the table, and he's washing each disciple's feet, and he gets to Peter, and it says, Peter said to him, "You shall never wash my feet." And Jesus answered him, "If I do not wash you, you have no share with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head." And here we see Peter as kind of the impulsive, impetuous one. He's the one who is so quick to speak that oftentimes his lips get ahead of his mind, doesn't it? And none of us can ever do that, can we? You ever speak up and you think, oh man, I should have never said that. And just in the response of Jesus, he knows so quickly, okay, that it seemed humble at the time, and now it just seems kind of foolish. And why did I say that? And I would guess this is one of those second last names that probably followed Peter quite a bit, because we see him being quick to speak several times throughout the Gospels, and people probably knew of him as, well, if no one else is going to say anything, Peter's probably going to say something. And so Peter tends to be kind of this impulsive, almost think before you act kind of guy. And then further in the story, Jesus is arrested in the garden, and everyone who is probably fearful and unsure and wondering, and the betrayer is there. And it says that Peter, Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. In this moment, doesn't it seem like he's the brave one? He's the courageous one. He's the defender. He's trying to make sure that Jesus is not taken away from them. He is too important. They shouldn't be able to do this. And it seems like, at least in human terms, he's doing the right thing. And you'll notice, by the way, in each of these moments, if they were your only encounter with him, wouldn't this be the thing? I mean, wouldn't this be the one thing that you remembered? And then further into the story, you go from this high of being the defender, and even though Jesus rebukes him in the next moment, further along, in chapter 18 and verse 17, it says the servant girl at the door, after Jesus has been arrested and Peter's kind of lingering outside, she said to Peter, "You are not one of this man's disciples, are you?" And he said, "I am not." And then in verse 25, Simon Peter was standing and warming himself there by the fire. And so they said to him, "You are also not one of his disciples, are you?" And he denied it and said, I'm not. And then in verse 27, Peter again denied it, and at once a rooster crowed. And so now Peter is exactly who Jesus said he would become back at the dinner. He's the denier. This one who has gone through all the ups and downs of Jesus, who has had moments of incredible faith and then what seems just like fearful doubt, who has had moments of courage where he's the guy who draws the sword. Even though he's taking it into his own hands, it still seems kind of like this courageous, defensive kind of moment. And then he's rebuked to the next moment. He's been so up and down, and now this same one who was the first to confess who Jesus is now the first to deny who Jesus is and the fact that he's even there with him. All of these ups and downs. And which one of them is right? They're all right, aren't they? And which one of them would be wrong to tag him with? Well, they kind of all would be wrong to tag him with, wouldn't they? Because he's bigger than each one of these moments. There are so many things that go on in his life. Are any of these a fair assessment or a complete view of who Peter is? And if you have studied Scripture, you know the answer to this question. No, they're not. If you were to tag Peter with one of these, it would be unfair. But not only would it be unfair, it wouldn't be accurate. And yet, how often do we do this to other people? And how many of us bear the burden of having this done to us, where we feel like there is this thing that has become who I am, and I just cannot escape it? And the beauty of John 21 is that is just not true. And as unfair and incomplete an assessment of Peter as all of these things are, whatever that thing is that hangs over you is the same. For you just to be that is not fair, it's not complete, it's not right. I love this quote I ran across a couple years ago. It's written by Brian Stevenson, who wrote the book Just Mercy that the book was based on. He does a lot of work with wrongful convictions and trying to get people freed from prison. And he said, we are all more than the worst thing we've ever done. You hear that again. We are all more than the worst thing we have ever done. And when Jesus encounters people throughout the Gospels, isn't that kind of the message? You are not just the woman caught in adultery. You are the woman who needs living water. You are not just the Peter who got out of the boat and then sank and then was brought up again. You are going to be something bigger than that. You are not just whatever the worst thing you've ever done is. You are something that is more than that. And honestly, even beyond just Jesus and the Gospels, isn't that a message of Scripture? As we looked at Hebrews 11 in class this morning, and each of those people who did amazing things in spite of the flaws that we know about them. They are not just the worst thing they've ever done, and neither are you. So Peter is going to get this message from Jesus that there are so many things we can see in it. There's these triples, there's the change of words, there's all kinds of stuff going on. But I will tell you, of all the times I've read through this, something really struck me this time. Jesus had a different identity and mission in mind for Peter, but he reminds him of where he came from very subtly. So here's Peter's mission according to Jesus. He begins by saying this. When they finished breakfast, and if you remember last time, if you weren't here, they had this miraculous catch of fish. They're fishermen. They're all out in the boat. They're all out there all night. They catch nothing, which had to be the most frustrating night ever. And then as they're out there, Jesus calls to them from the shore and says, I've got a great fishing plan for you. These are my words, not his. I've got a great fishing plan for you. Why don't you try taking that giant net and just putting it on the other side of the boat? Why don't you move your net 4 or 5 feet away, and then we'll see what happens. And for whatever reason, they do. Faith in him, they do. And then they pull the net out, and it says they can barely get it out of the water because there's so many fish in it, so many large fish in it, and they bring it to shore, and they count the fish. They find out there's 153 of them. They have this incredible catch that Jesus has guided them to. Jesus is there on the shore waiting with a fire going to cook breakfast. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John. Now, all the way back in the beginning of the story, when Jesus first calls Peter, he stops calling him Simon and begins calling him Peter, which means rock in Greek. And what we will find back in that confession, when we looked at Peter the Confessor, is that on that rock of his confession, he was going to build his church. Peter was the rock. He was this incredible guy that's going to do all these amazing things. And now, this broken man that we find here in John 21, who's trying to figure out where life is going because of the denials that he's made and the mistakes that he's made, is reminded of who he used to be. Simon, son of John, not Peter. It's interesting to me that Jesus chooses that name to call him throughout this. And I think very intentionally. I think there are a lot of intentional choices with words throughout this chapter. But Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? And if you will remember, if you were here last Sunday evening, we talked a little bit about faith and the fact that real faith, real belief brings action with it. And then we mentioned from 1 John, also written by the same John who wrote this gospel, the idea that love is the same thing. That if you really love someone, you do things differently than you would otherwise. You do things in a way that show your love for whoever that is. And so he says, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? And he said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And he said to him, feed my lambs. So first of all, Peter's mission, according to Jesus, is to love Jesus more. To love, and I think we could take it a couple different ways. Clearly, to love him more, try to outlove Jesus when it comes to all the others who are trying to love Jesus. And I would guess within our lives, we have some good examples of people who are loving Jesus really well. So what if we try as best we can to love Jesus better than they're doing it? Not because it's a competition, not because we want the best seat at the table or the most honor, but because we want to make sure we're loving Jesus as much as we can. And then the flip side of this coin is, maybe we need to be reminded to love Jesus more than the other things and people that we love. And there are things and people out there that we love a lot. And there have been times where that love has been brought to new levels. We have been, because of a baby shower taking place today, last night at like 10:45, we're in Walmart. Not just for this, for other things too, but we're in Walmart and we found ourselves in the baby section, as we have from time to time lately, and we look at things and we're just melted. And, you know, I want to be like the manly man in the baby section of Walmart, and I'm looking at something just going, oh, he's going to be so cute in that. And you just have these moments of, and I know when he comes along, it's going to be another level of love that I have not yet comprehended at this point. Like it was when his dad came along a long time ago. Like it was when his mom became my wife well before that. Like at each time of life that we have run into. And so Jesus says, you understand love in your life. There are people in your life that are so important, it's difficult to imagine loving someone more than that. And Jesus would say, let's go a notch higher than that. Let's go several notches higher than that. Do you love me more than these? Then continuing on, he said to him a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And he said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And he said to him, tend my sheep. Notice he switches from feed over here to tend, care for others. There are a lot of opportunities in our lives where we can be indifferent. There are a lot of opportunities in our lives where we can be frustrated with other people. There are times where we are justified in that, where we have been wronged, where the people are doing exactly what we think they're doing and it's not the right thing, and we have all different reactions that would be fine within our world. And Jesus says, tend them, care for them. So when we look at one another, our first thought should not be frustration or where you have wronged me or how you can do better. Even though all of those things may be true, our first thought should be love and care for others. Are we doing the things to care? And we could fit rebuke into this, and unfortunately we probably fit rebuke into this higher than care sometimes. There's correction, there's care, there's love, there's guidance. There's all the things a shepherd would do with sheep. If you love me, one of the actions you will do to show that is not just directed towards Jesus, it's directed towards his people and the people that he loves and cares about. So tend my sheep. And then he said to him the third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, do you love me? You ever get tired of proving yourself? You ever have those moments where you think to yourself, I should have done enough now that you get it? And I'm sure Peter is feeling some of this, and yet at the same time understands who Jesus is, and that probably something deeper going on here. Or maybe even though he wants to show the way he is grieved here, also understands all of the mistakes he's made and the denial that wasn't all that long ago. And he just is caught. And we are here sometimes, and I think unfortunately what happens when you're here sometimes is it paralyzes you. And you just don't do anything, you don't know what to do or how to feel, and you're just sad and you feel alone and all of that. And you will notice that Jesus doesn't want to leave Peter alone out there on his own. He's here with Peter for a reason. And so he has this conversation where he asks him again and again. Jesus wants him to be introspective, but Jesus wants him to be better. And he wants him to be able to put these things above all of the other stuff that Peter is worried about. But Peter is still, he's hurt. And when we are hurt, what are we going to do? I hope we will continue the conversation as Jesus and Peter have here. So he says a third time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know everything." And maybe that's a good starting point for us when we're in those moments where we feel like we're alone and we feel grieved and we feel like we've had to prove ourselves so many times. Maybe we need to remember, he knows everything. And not only does he know everything, but he knew everything before you were ever going to do those things in the first place and still chose to love you. He knew if there's that thing that's the second last name that you're having a hard time letting go of, he knew about that before it happened. He knew it would happen. He probably grieved for you that it would happen and hated you had to go through it, and yet he still loved you enough to send his son. And so he says, "You know everything. You know that I love you." And Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep." So Jesus' mission beyond all the other things for Peter is to feed. And what is feed? It's helping other people grow. And so Jesus' message for Peter is, all of these experiences that have made you who you are, the second last names that you'd like to let go of, you'd like to shake, you'd like to be identified by something else, all of those things have combined to make you the person you are right now. And so are you going to run from those things? Are you going to regret those things? Are you going to wish you could change those things, which are all natural human things? Or are you going to grow from those things, see others around you struggling with similar things, and help them grow too? So take your sheep and feed them. Help them to grow. So Jesus says, by loving me, you're helping others around you, you're caring for them, but you're also helping them to be better. Help them to grow. And what is that? That struggle that you're hanging on to that you hope no one here knows, there's a good chance someone else here is going through the same struggle and hoping you don't know too. What if we shared with each other and walked alongside each other to help each other grow through those things instead of trying to hide everything and look perfect all the time? I am your preacher up here. I try to be as together as I can be. I can be a mess sometimes. I've messed up a lot of stuff in life. I've said a lot of dumb things. I've done a lot of dumb things. And if I can somehow help you because of that, I'm glad to help you because of that. I was reading in a book not too long ago about a husband and wife taking their child on a college visit to the college that they had met at. And when the husband and wife were there, the wife was so excited about all of the good memories of being there and all of the successes there. And as soon as he set foot out of the car, all he could think about was failure because of everything he had done wrong in college and how it hadn't gone well and all the time and money that were wasted and all of that stuff and how they looked at the same place and it was two totally different experiences. And I will guarantee you within their lives, they will encounter people who have had exactly those same experiences, who could use their help to grow. So Jesus says to Peter, feed my sheep, help others to grow. In verse 18, he says, truly I say to you, when you were young, you used to dress yourself and walk wherever you wanted, but when you are old, you will stretch out your hands and another will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go. This he said to show by what kind of death he was to glorify God. And after saying this, he said to him, follow me. So part of Peter's mission, according to Jesus, is stay the course. There was a time where you were making your own decisions, everything was going the way you wanted to go, but if you follow through with this, it's going to lead to difficulty. And that's an important message for us today too. There are times where the Christian life is the most amazing, incredible, uplifting, encouraging. People around you are great, everything is just right. And there are times where being a Christian is hard. Now, I don't think it's hard at the level of what Peter is going to experience. History will tell us, we don't read this in Scripture, but history and tradition tell us that Peter is eventually crucified. And when they go to crucify him, he says, I am not worthy to be crucified in the way that my Lord was. And so they crucify him upside down. We don't know 100% that's true, but there seems to be a lot of history and tradition that goes that direction. And it fits right in with what Jesus says here. You're going to be led to a place that you don't want to go. Sometimes it's tough, but stay the course. Don't give up on this. He continues on. In verse 20, it says that Peter turned and saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following them, the one who had also leaned back against him during the supper and had said, Lord, who is it that is going to betray you? And when Peter saw him, he said to Jesus, Lord, what about this man? I thought for the longest time that the idea of, you hear it said every now and then, whataboutism. Everything is what about in our world today. It's not a brand new idea. It goes way back when. Peter says, well, what about him? You've told me what's going to happen with me. What about him? And Jesus said to him, if it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? You follow me. So Jesus says, basically, take personal responsibility. Maybe this is Jesus' way of saying to Peter, stay in your lane. Don't worry about John. Don't worry about comparing yourself with someone else. If you are constantly comparing yourself to someone else's walk with Jesus, you are going to be incredibly great, probably so much so that it's not realistic sometimes because someone else is struggling so much. Or at the other end of the spectrum, you might feel like you are nothing because of how well it seems like they're doing it. That's not the point. There is not a ranking system that I'm aware of. If you were to walk back in our classes with kids back there, you will find charts on the wall in some of those classes. And I have a love-hate relationship with charts. But you'll find charts on the wall, and there generally will be stickers on there. I was sometimes in charge in the preschool class of giving out stickers because I could do that and not mess it up most of the time. And Stacy would give me stickers to give to kids to go put on the wall if they were there or they did whatever. It's not a ranking system. You don't go in the preschool class and see who has the most stickers and that's the best preschooler. It's just kind of one of those things that we do. And when it comes to Christianity, it's not about, are you doing it better than he's doing it or she's doing it or worse or any of those things. It's not about, well, what about the death of Peter and the death of John or how they're going to follow? It's not about any of those things. It's about you do what you can do. And so, Peter, don't worry about what John is going to do or not going to do. You do the best job of being Simon Peter, follower of Jesus, that you can be. And so for each of you, stop worrying about comparing yourself to somebody else. You don't have to do it the way that they do it. You have to do it the way that you do, the way that God designed you to be. God did not make you to be someone else. God made you to be you. So you be the best you following him that you can be. So the saying spread abroad among the brothers that the disciple was not going to die. This is how rumors get started. Jesus didn't even say that. Yet Jesus did not say to him that he was not going to die. But if it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? This is the disciple who is bearing witness about these things and who has written these things, and we know that his testimony is true. They know that all of these things that we have been reading about, looking at, talking about for the last several months, they know that it's true. Now, there are also many other things that Jesus did. And, beyond that, there are also many other things that Peter did, aren't there? And there are a lot of other things that could have been Peter's second last name, good and bad. And yet Jesus tells him to keep doing what he needs to be doing. Were every one of them to be written, I suppose the world itself could not contain the books that would be written. And so the question for us this morning is, what do you want your second last name to be? We have, a lot of us, been tagged with one that we felt like was kind of out of our control, or we had a moment where we made a bad decision and then we just can't seem to shake it. But you can decide for something different today. Who do you want to be? Who do you want when you encounter that person that the last time they encountered you was when you made that giant mistake? Who do you want to be the next time they see you? Do you want them to leave that encounter with you and think, what happened? This is not who I remember. This is somebody that's very different than they used to be, and I like who this person's become. Because you can, through the power of the Spirit, you can do that. You can be someone different than who you are today. I think who Jesus wants us to be most of all is a child of God. Someone who follows him, someone who's going to be with him throughout eternity, someone shows faith and love and shows that in action to the people around us. And this morning, if you are not that, you can change that today. Don't wait for other stuff to get fixed. Don't wait for everything else to line up, because everything else never seems to line up. Don't wait till everything is just right. Change that. Take that first step today. Confess his name as Peter did. Be baptized into him and change your life. Or if you have walked away from that because maybe you keep finding yourself drawn back to that other identity that you wish you could shake, you can walk away from that today too. You can come back. If there's some way we can help you, something we can pray about, we love you as your church family. Please come as we stand and sing.